Well, I think many of you in the fan base might be a little too high on the Kenneth Walker to Broncos notion. Could James Conner have actually been linked to the Broncos? And of course, talking a little bit more about the incoming rookie class. Of course, this is A&J, and we're here with an early morning Broncos talk, earlier than normal, than what we actually have been on a regular basis, but who knows, we might start working a little bit more of this. If nothing else, you'll start getting more earlier uploads. At least that's something that I've been trying to work towards in recent weeks. And not even just a Broncos talk, just of anything else that I may have available for you at the time. But nonetheless, we want to just go right into it. And like I said, I wanted to elaborate a little bit further on my thoughts regarding the rookie class, and or the upcoming rookie class rather, and if nothing else, it's quite fascinating because Sean Payton putting it out there that the Broncos aren't going to be looking to add any wide receivers, which to me, I don't know if I necessarily believe or agree with that, but I do see a scenario where that actually could end up being proven to be true, especially with the main topic of this video. But for me, if I could just be perfectly honest about that, I don't really see where that actually pans out accordingly, especially when you think about the fact that, truth be told, I feel like the wide receiver position is arguably one of the glaring needs, especially when it comes to the Broncos offense, along with running back and perhaps even tight end, of course, all the skill positions, other than quarterback, obviously. But to think that the Broncos wouldn't necessarily add a receiver either in free agency or the draft, I find that actually a little bit hard to believe, and I don't feel like it's as simple as firing receivers coach Kerry Colbert. There's a little bit more to this than what we realized, although I am inclined to believe that had we used Marvin Mims a little bit more as a receiver, perhaps as a bit more of a deep threat, things would have worked out differently. And of course, that's easy to say when it comes to the availability of Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant, but I don't think either of those things will be as big an issue going into 2026. I'm counting on both of them to actually, and even Mims, who saw some time out with an injury of his own. I feel like all three will probably be more readily available, but that doesn't mean you can't add a guy who would actually, if nothing else, contribute a lot differently to the wide receiver room than what we've actually gotten in the past X number of years, if we're being perfectly honest. Especially since we have the likes of Demaryius Thomas and Cortland Sutton at certain points certainly showed those flashes, but this past season wasn't anything to write home about, and it doesn't help that the drops were what they were. But one way or another, I kind of feel like whether it is through free agency or the draft, I personally believe it'll end up being both. I think we'll see additions to the wide receiver room, and it may not necessarily be the ones that we're looking to actually see, but one way or another, I would expect a change there, certainly in the tight end category as well. But nonetheless, I just want to get really quickly into the notion that James Conner actually at one point was linked to joining the Denver Broncos, and to be perfectly honest with you, there was a point where I would have liked for that to have been the case, especially, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Unfortunately, especially having been out in Arizona for as long as I was, I've seen James Conner up close. When healthy and available, he's actually just as good as any running back, similar to a J.K. Dobbins, but unfortunately, the injury bug has plagued him quite a bit, and I don't know that they necessarily have the best medical staff down in Arizona. I never really paid much attention to that, so much as I did to the things that were going on in Denver. So I guess that just goes to show where I'm at on that. But the point I'm trying to make here is I don't know necessarily that bringing him out here, especially at this point with the recent injury that he had in 2025, I don't feel any better about that than a lot of folks do about bringing back JK, and I'm still actually pretty high on that idea, as I'll get into here with the main topic. But for me, if I'm wanting anyone from the Arizona Cardinals, and this is why I talked about the receiver room earlier, is if anything, I'd be looking to see what I could offer up for Marvin Harrison Jr. You know, people are talking about bringing in George Pickens. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. Of course, Alec Pierce from the Colts is a little bit more likely, but I guess only time will tell on that one. That's just the direction I'd be looking to go if I were to bring in anyone from the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, it wouldn't be Kyler Murray, as they're looking to release him. I'm going to actually drop a video where it's going to be a Broncos talk adjacent kind of thing, but it's going to be more regarding what I'm talking about with the Cardinals. Stay tuned for that. But nonetheless, we got to get right into it. Of course, the report came out where it seems as of right now the two landing spots for Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker are the Broncos and the Chiefs. Now, here's what's kind of wild to me about this. A lot of people are really, how should I put this? They're pretty damn gung-ho about bringing Kenneth Walker to the Broncos, especially if it means keeping him from signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. And in theory, I can understand the reasoning behind that, and the logic certainly is sound. Don't get me wrong. But here's the problem, and I'm not going to go into this with a bunch of evidence on this. I'm just going to say this with the notion that I at least consider myself to be something of a historian. I've said that in the past in a lot of videos, and just really did the point where I might have just pointed that out ad nauseum. I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that I don't deny the notion of how good Kenneth Walker looked on the Seahawks run to the Super Bowl, and he was certainly important for them, especially with Zach Charbonnet being out with injury. We got to be perfectly clear on something here. I can understand where he would definitely fit in. He would certainly produce and actually pay dividends for the Broncos offense. But to the tune of about 15, even $16 million, especially given the fact that as of now the Broncos have 26 to 28 million to work with, I don't really feel as strongly as a lot of you guys do in that regard. And it's not to say that he isn't worth the money, but here's some things that you guys need to consider about this. For one, there's a history with Super Bowl MVPs joining other teams, namely Larry Brown from Super Bowl 30 with the Cowboys when he went to the Raiders. You know, that didn't necessarily pan out. And I want to say Dexter Jackson with the Buccaneers, I want to say roughly around 10 years or so later, it was, I believe, a couple of Super Bowls before Super Bowl 40, where it was the Steelers that beat the Seahawks, and ironically enough, in their first Super Bowl appearance. But really what I'm trying to get at with this is we had a running back that was a Super Bowl MVP. His name was Terrell Davis, and yeah, I understand the following year, after he won Super Bowl MVP, the Broncos went back-to-back. I think you ought to notice the fact that that was also the swan song of John Elway, and he retired the next year. What happened the following year, though? In that following year, rather. not only did the Broncos tail off, but Terrell Davis ended up getting hurt, I want to say about 5, 6 games into the season, and was nowhere near the same in totality ever since. I mean, yeah, there was that season opener, I think a couple of years later, where we had that infamous breaking of Ed McCaffrey's leg. Oddly enough, that was also 9/11 Eve, right before 9/11 actually happened. But really, what I'm trying to give you is just examples as to why that could go against us. And the thing that you guys also have to realize about that is that these are things that come together as far as that Super Bowl run that I talked about. Those just happen to work out because that's what's working out at the time. There's no guaranteed carryover with these things realistically, and while it looks good and sounds good in theory, it could even work out in practice. I mean, for all I know, I could have it to where, or we could have it rather, to where the Broncos do sign Kenneth Walker regardless of what the figure turns out to be. And he could end up proving me wrong, and I would certainly root for him to do so. That being said, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work out that way, and the stigma of him well, I shouldn't say the stigma, but the hype around him being a Super Bowl MVP only leads to being more of a stigma for me than anything else, and that's just where I stand on that. Not to mention, call me a bargain shopper for this, but I prefer the idea of bringing in a Tyler Algier from what's been mentioned about to be about a 3-year, $22 million deal, which I feel like beats the shit out of 12 to even 16 million per year. And you're going to be getting just as much. You're going to be getting a better receiver. And of course, you're going to be getting a guy who really hasn't missed a whole lot of time at all. Unlike JK, which I'd also bring JK back if it is the Broncos end up going the direction of Tyler Algier. But all the same, all I'm trying to point out here is, for me, I'm not going to buy into the hype as much as a lot of you have. And it's okay if you disagree with me on that. I'm not going to really hold anything against you on that. I'm just stating my piece just the same as anybody that is out here, whether they're content creators or just regular Joes like myself that are posting their thoughts about this on Twitter or wherever else. So, it is what it is on that. Let me know what y'all think down below, whether you disagree or agree with me or not. Look forward to hearing from y'all on that. And of course, help me out with that algorithm, as I've been saying before. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. Oh, and before I forget, I definitely have to give a quick shout out. New subscriber came in over the night, I think in the early morning, and I'm just gonna have to go back and get this one here. And if nothing else, again, I definitely want to thank you on that for all the new subscribers that come through. Korhan Akar, apologies if I butchered that any, but like I said, anytime that y'all come through on the new subs, I'm gonna shout y'all out. So there you go on that one. Either way, I thank you very much, because this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it with me.